On the evening of October 4th, 1955, 3 Americans were riding aboard a train through the Soviet countryside. One of them caught a glimpse of something strange outside a window, a distant object rising up from the horizon. Then, a moment later, another object rose up into the sky. By this point, all 3 men were staring out the window, and that's when things really got strange. As the Americans watched the second object, the Soviet trainmen rushed through the car, closing curtains and telling the Americans they were no longer allowed to look outside. And these 3 Americans, well, they weren't just ordinary travelers. But whatever they had just witnessed, it was made clear they were never supposed to see it. What you're about to hear comes from a U.S. Air Force intelligence document marked Secret. The report was titled Observations of Traveler in USSR, and according to the document, the witnesses involved were considered highly reliable because the 3 Americans on that train were not ordinary passengers. One of them was Richard Russell Jr., one of the most powerful senators in the United States during the Cold War. Traveling with him were E.U. Hathaway and Reuben Efron. And according to the report, all 3 men believed they had witnessed something extraordinary. The date was October 4th, 1955. The location was deep inside the Soviet Union, in the Trans-Caucasus region. At around 7:10 p.m., the train had been traveling roughly 10 minutes after departing Ajati, moving toward Adzhajabul. Outside, dusk was beginning to settle across the landscape. Then the witnesses noticed something unusual south of the railroad line. According to the report, 2 searchlight beams were visible near the horizon. The beams pointed almost vertically into the sky. The men continued watching, and that's when the object appeared. The intelligence report describes the object as circular and disc-shaped. It rose almost vertically from an area estimated to be 1 to 2 miles south of the railroad line. The witnesses estimated the object climbed to roughly 6,000 feet. Then its movement changed. The object leveled off, accelerated rapidly, turned north, and disappeared. But the strangest detail may have been the way it moved during the ascent. According to the report, the outer edge or outer surface appeared to revolve slowly to the right as it climbed. In addition, the witnesses claimed they could not determine the exact size or color of the object due to its distance and poor lighting conditions. But the witnesses did report seeing 2 lights near the top or inside portion of the object. And importantly, the movement did not resemble a normal aircraft. The report specifically notes the ascent appeared controlled and nearly vertical. Then came the moment that changed the entire tone of the encounter. According to the report, Soviet train personnel suddenly became visibly excited. The trainmen moved through the rail car and closed the curtains. The American passengers were then told they were no longer allowed to look outside. The report specifically comments that this reaction appeared to indicate the Americans had witnessed something they were not supposed to see. And during the Cold War, inside the Soviet Union, that detail carried enormous weight. Because if this had simply been an ordinary aircraft, why react that way? Why block the windows? Why prevent foreign observers from continuing to watch? The report never answers those questions. The Air Force document does not claim the objects were extraterrestrial. It does not attempt to declare the encounter proof of alien life. But the report does make something very clear. The witnesses involved were considered reliable. And as I continued reading through the file, one question kept bothering me. Why were Soviet personnel so desperate to stop people from looking outside? And, well, I've developed a theory about that. And while it may sound unbelievable at first, by the end of this video, I think you'll understand why this incident still raises questions, nearly 70 years later. One possible explanation is that the witnesses observed some form of classified Soviet technology. And during the 1950s, both the United States and Soviet Union were aggressively developing advanced aircraft under extreme secrecy. And while this sounds plausible, well, another theory kept coming to mind. A crazy thought. But hey, we're crazy, right? At least that's what we've been told. About a year or so before this incident took place, rumors began circulating around one of the strangest stories connected to the early UFO era, a story involving President Dwight Eisenhower. According to the claims, Eisenhower briefly disappeared from public view during a trip to Palm Springs in February of 1954. The official explanation was a dental emergency, But over the decades, another story began to emerge. One claiming the president may have secretly met with non-human entities at a military facility connected to Edwards Air Force Base. Officially, of course, they will say no such meeting ever took place. But many believe there is more hidden beneath the surface. And in my opinion, somewhere, locked away in a classified archive, there may be a file connected to that day, one marked with instructions never to disclose its contents under any circumstance. Because if that type of information got out, well, the world would have more questions than ever. But the timing of this event is interesting, because just over a year later, inside the Soviet Union, high-ranking American officials reportedly witnessed strange aerial objects ascending into the sky before Soviet personnel suddenly attempted to block passengers from seeing more. And honestly, if I were a member of the trained personnel, I'd be looking out of the window like the others, unless I already knew what was out there. But what if the Soviet reaction had less to do with random passengers seeing strange lights in the sky and more to do with who was actually on that train? Maybe this wasn't simply about witnesses seeing experimental technology. Perhaps the Soviet Union had its own scheduled encounter, its own meeting, its own secret interaction with the non-human entities. And maybe the trained personnel knew just enough to understand one thing: the Americans on that train, well, they were never supposed to witness it. Now, despite the fact that these witnesses held high-ranking positions within the United States government, it's unlikely they were ever privileged with information regarding the alleged Eisenhower meeting. To them, this was simply an unexplained event. Something unusual moving through the skies over the Soviet Union that night. Perhaps they believed they had witnessed some form of advanced Soviet technology, but somewhere behind the scenes, someone knew exactly what took place that night. Thank you for watching, and thank you to everyone who continues to support this channel. I see all of your comments, likes, and shares, and honestly, it means a lot to me. Your support truly helps keep these videos going. If there's a specific file, case, or topic you'd like to see covered in a future video, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you'd like to support the channel and help these videos continue, you can find the support links in the channel description. Once again, thank you for being here. Until next time, keep looking up.